Over there, Dan.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
And welcome to the Midday Show. I'm Jeff Everett. He is Mark Messina. We're bringing on a special guest today. Or can we call him the Midday Show political correspondent? We don't have.
He's the only one we have.
I know. I'm excited. I feel like we should have correspondents, but I don't know if that's the right term. But we're gonna have Jason Fitzgerald on today, so we can ask him a lot of our political questions, some stuff about City Hall and Williamsport, possibly dive into some of the state stuff that's happening in Pennsylvania. And then kind of expand out and maybe talk about Russia and China's agreement that they came to together here during the Winter Olympics. Before we bring Jason on here in a second, Mark, how are you feeling today?
Right now, I'm good because we just had a good little humorous pregame session there with Jason. And
okay,
but yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I'm better than people. It always cracks me up when people are like texting me last night. How are you doing? Because we played a basketball game. One of our teams played exceptionally well. One of our teams did not, and mine was the one that did not. I didn't actually think we played that bad. I just thought you guys were great. So anyway, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. There's a whole, and we've talked about this. There's a whole, anger that's directed towards other teams' players, and you had, a couple kids who were great. You have one kid who just, maybe played the best shooting game of his life.
Yeah.
So while I'm watching and people are like, we've got to go, there's part of me that's like, God, he's got to be feeling good. Because we've all had those days as athletes where you got to go.
Sure.
As a dad, I'm like, God, his parents are proud as hell. Like he's making every shot he's taking.
Sure.
So anyway, it is what it is. But no, I'm good.
We'll definitely dive into that at the end of the show because there's some stuff I want to talk about the crowd. I want to talk about the student sections. There's things that I want to talk about from the game last night. At this time, we're going to bring on Jason Fitzgerald. Bear with us here. Jason, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys great. Thanks, Jeff and Mark.
Carpool karaoke is what I'm ready for. That's what I'm seeing.
Okay, well, I'm in the passenger seat of the car. We're heading back from Pittsburgh today. And so my associate colleague, Phil Torometer, is driving, and I'm safely in the passenger seat.
Well, this is how it works. If you've ever seen the show, he picks the music and you sing. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
You would go with Meatloaf. I know that, just from the last couple of
weeks. Well, if we did, it would take up the whole segment, just like one song. So I don't know if we'll. But
Jason, we sometimes on the show, political topics come up, and while Mark and I like to think that we are intelligent people, it's always nice to have a third person on, and especially somebody who certainly has their hand and their mind in some of this stuff daily, unlike Mark and I. One of the first things that I think is worth bringing up locally is the city of Williamsport and City Hall possibly being up for sale. You can find articles at NorthcentralPa.com and the Williamsport Sun-Gazette for any of our listeners who are curious. There's a formal request for proposals for realtor services, and they've been submitted for advertisement. I know that there's kind of a conflicting report as far as it went through City Council, but it didn't go through City Council. Can you fill us in? What do you know about it, and what's your take on it?
So, City Council certainly was aware that these conversations were occurring. This has been a topic of discussion for the last 2 years. I'm not surprised by the announcement. I personally would love to be able to see the City Hall building remain a government center, and I have some ideas on how that could be done. But I have from time to time been critical of Mayor Slaughter. I'm actually the kind of guy that when I think someone's right, I say it, and when I think someone's wrong, I say it. And I think that the mayor's been unfairly criticized on this particular issue. To blame a man who's only been in office for 2 years for deficiencies in a building that have occurred over the last 30 years just isn't fair. The reason that City Hall's in the condition that it's in today is simple. There were no relatively few preventative maintenance steps taken to maintain the building. And anybody who owns a historic building, as I do, and Mark, I know, is in the real estate business, you have to, on a regular basis, invest in a building. Doesn't matter if it's new, old, or whatever. Every year, I remember there being a deferred maintenance line item in the budget, and every year it was cut by council and previous administrations. So this building is falling apart because it wasn't maintained. So if we as a city move into another building, even a new shiny building, whether we build one or preventative maintenance steps, we're going to find ourselves.
Yeah. So I mean, I get
Same position. Also, I don't think that there's not a single real estate professional. Go ahead. There's not a single.
Oh no, I was just going to cover that.
There's not a single real estate professional that I've spoken to be losing you due to the area that we're in.
Are you up on the mountain? Could you take that trip from Pittsburgh and you get like the highest point?
Are we okay now?
Yeah, I think we're going to be okay. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I think you're good. I was just going to say, if you're at the highest point, because there's some place on that, isn't it the highest point of Route 80 between here and the Mississippi River is between here and Pittsburgh?
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think, isn't there a sign on there that says, I think that's as you go here, out towards like Du Bois and stuff like that. So if that's where you're at, I'm not surprised. But you seem to be back and good. So go ahead, say it again.
Okay. So I haven't spoken to a single real estate professional or business person who really believes that building needs $15 million worth of upgrades. I think that it can be done significantly less than that. And I think that what we have to be mindful of is that buildings, infrastructure, et cetera, need to be maintained. And it's not, a sexy political issue to say, well, we're going to spend, $250,000 or $300,000, on an annual basis maintaining this building. But we would have preserved, I think, a treasure had we done that. So I just hope that the mayor and council will move forward and, look at all these options. But let's look at the option of keeping the building. Let's also look at public-private options where a private developer could come in, purchase the building with the intent to lease it back to the city, where it would then be on the tax rolls. Private folks tend to do a better job of maintaining buildings than public entities do. And look, if it can work in a way that a business person can make the numbers work, and it creates stability in what the city would have to pay on a monthly or annual basis to stay in their home, that might work out. So I hope that that's an option that's looked at as well.
Why? I got an idea. Why don't the three of us? Here, let me go through my wallet. I can
already see
20.
where this is going.
I have $29 in my wallet right now. How about the three of us go together and we'll buy it and lease it back to them?
Well, sure, we could talk about that. I mean, I know there are some people in town that are interested in that and throughout the state that have done that. So, and again, maybe the numbers don't.
No, it is a fascinating, as he just froze up again, how much government, that the government doesn't own all the buildings that they're in. There are lots of government offices that are privately owned. And if this is just one of them, if that's one of the options to sell it to a private entity who part of their agreement, then, you can sign a 49-year lease. You can sign a 99. You could sign a lease that goes on in perpetuity with the city as long as the city wants it. So they can never get it yanked from them. But yes, and it's a long-term investment for the people because it's just like you're garnering interest.
Absolutely. Jason, moving on to like the state of Pennsylvania, as kind of like a noob to politics, I'm naive. I'm a millennial. Let's put it that way. I'm a political millennial, if that's fair to say. I know about redrawing of congressional maps. I understand what's happening, but in the state of Pennsylvania, can you kind of illuminate for the average citizen what is actually taking place right now with the map? Obviously, they're redrawing it. What's the purpose? What's kind of the driving force behind it, in your opinion?
Hold on. This is the illumination part of the show. That we don't do this every day, Jason. So this is a special time.
Well, thank you. I'm honored as always to be. I enjoy being on here with you guys. It's fun for me. Every 10 years, after in conjunction with the census, the legislature is required to sorry to do this to you guys. I think we'll be
You're
back
okay.
in just a minute. It's just that so every 10 years we're required to redraw legislative districts so that they're fairly appropriated. So, for example, in the state house, so you take the population of the Commonwealth, which has went down, divide it by the number of state house and state senate seats, and they have to be approximately equal. So I think a house seat has about a state.
All right. I don't know. What should we do?
Listen, we'll pull Jason off here for a second, and if I see him back on here at the bottom, we'll bring him back on. So that way, Jason, if you can hear us, we'll bring you back on in a second once you're through it all.
Well, anyway, I will say this. As we were talking about redistricting, I just read an article about this in Alabama. So it's just not happening here. And one of the great political debates, the term gerrymandering, which comes about, which what people don't realize, at least I didn't realize this till I was in my probably late 40s, that we think that there's just like school districts have lines, and cities have, you're out of Williamsport, now you're in Loyalsock, you're in Old Lycoming Township or whatever, and but the voting maps change all the time, and they're changed by the people who are elected in. So one of the great debates after the last is the Democrats feel like that the Republicans are doing their best to keep the Democrats from being able to vote. And the Republicans, obviously say that we're just trying to do it fairly. But it's not, these things change on the regular, and they're changed by the party in power. And so is it a fair way to do it? Because is the party in power? Because one of the things I just read, and I don't know why I got clickbaited into this, but in the state of Alabama, 27% of the population of Alabama is black. But they're only going to, out of like 7 districts, they're going to only have 1 that is predominantly black. So when you look at the math of it, that's like they're going to have 14% representation while they have 27% of the population. Mm-hmm. And they were saying, and there was a lower court that said, we should have 2 out of 7, which is 28% to the 27%. But the Supreme Court just voted against it 5-4. So this is what we're all talking about.
Yeah. Well, Jason, go ahead. You were starting to talk about the numbers and how that works for Pennsylvania.
So we're pulled over now. So the
did you get pulled over, or was this?
No. We just pulled over because I figured this would be easier. We'll finish.
We appreciate it
while we're in a good service area. So the situation is that so in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we lost a congressional seat because we lost population. So that means that we have to redraw those lines as well. So the maps that were put forward, it is a political process. Now there are those who have for a long time, myself included, been arguing for this to be done by academics and not politicians. There are computer systems, models, etc., who can do these things. I mean, we have statisticians. I can't use that word right. Economists. There are so many people who are much smarter than me and most of the people in Harrisburg.
If he was going to say much smarter than us, I was going to take offense to that. But okay,
I didn't say smart. I did not say smarter than you guys.
Real quick, Jason, is there anybody doing that? Is there an entity somewhere that's how they draw their lines, or is that more of just like a thought process?
There might be some states. There's a group in Pennsylvania called the Committee of 70. The new executive director of that is the former Republican commissioner of elections, Al Schmidt, and Al is pushing for bipartisan solutions, nonpartisan solutions, and he has talked about that. The maps, there's always folks that I don't like particularly that, for example, out in the northeastern part of the state, it's pretty clear that they intentionally drew out the only independent in the Senate, Senator Yudichak, who was a Democrat, switched to independent. He's now been essentially drawn out of a district because would have to face a very popular Republican senator in a district that's about 70% Republican. Also, Senator Lisa Boscola, who is while she is a Democrat, she is an independent thinker. She's essentially been drawn out of a district. So I don't like when that happens. I mean, it has been a political process. I guess we'll see what the courts have to say about it. But there's a number of legislators in the House side too who are essentially losing their seats. I mean, the borough of Jersey Shore for a long time has been represented by whoever the representative was for the 84th district, which is now Joe Ham. Lycoming County under these maps will have 3 state representatives, one who will represent parts of the western part of the district, one who will represent the center, and then one who will represent the eastern part. But both the legislator who will represent western Lycoming County and eastern Lycoming County, the majority of their constituents will not be inside the county. So how much are they going to care about Lycoming County? I think those two, I'm not saying those two individuals particularly, though they will, but you've got to look to the future because this is a 10-year process. So yeah, I mean, it's sort of one of those things that it is what it is, but yeah, I think there's lots of room for improvement. I really think that there needs to be some sort of an effort to do this, to allow scholars and experts to come up with these districts, not politicians.
You used the term, we hear bipartisan all the time, and it doesn't happen very much, or maybe it happens more than we realize, but it doesn't seem to happen very much. But you use the word nonpartisan. And you're right. If there's anything that should be nonpartisan, I agree with your plan 100%. Let people who have no dog in the fight other than doing the math and doing it fairly. And that sounds great to me. You got my vote.
Because this has been a bipartisan process. The Republicans and Democrats got together and decided which members of their caucus they wanted to screw and worked together and did it. So, I mean, that's a bipartisan. So you've got to be careful when you say bipartisan. I truly think it needs to be nonpartisan.
I don't know if you had a chance or not. Governor Wolf spoke today.
Mm-hmm.
Most of it was about the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of your take on Pennsylvania's budget, where it was, where it's at now. And then also, too, I don't know if you have a strong opinion about the minimum wage. Mark and I have talked briefly about the minimum wage. Him and I joke all the time about we try to find topics where we sit on the fence, where we're not sure which side we want to step on. And minimum wage for me is one of those. Like I'm on the fence of that, and I'm not sure which way I want to put my foot on it. Just briefly about the budget of PA and Governor Wolf, what he said today. And then also if you want to dive into the minimum wage, if that tickles your fancy at all.
Sure. So, I mean, Governor Wolf's budget proposal was about what was expected. I know that there are some on the right, the Republicans that are critical of it. And I'm a registered Republican, and there's some Democrats who are happy with it. But, I think that, what the situation is that there are about there's about $6 billion in federal money that has to be appropriated. I think that most Pennsylvanians and both parties, according to polls anyway, believe that those funds should be used to rebuild critical infrastructure, roads, bridges, etc. There's some who've said that the governor is focusing too much on social programs and other things. So that'll be a debate that I'd like to hear more about. And maybe we can talk about it once I've had a chance to sort of digest all the information. But I certainly, the governor has a tough job. I have been, even though I am a Republican, I've been, I've complimented the governor when I thought that he's done good things. And as far as my line of work, and trying to provide grant funding for communities, the governor's been fair to us in that regard. But, that's kind of what the ideological debate will be, is there'll be some who want to spend nothing. And then, how much do we spend on social programs and other things? And then how much do we spend on critical infrastructure? On the minimum wage, that issue seems to be taking care of itself. You have in a true capitalist society, even though it sometimes you know upsets people at the top or the bottom or whatever, when you have a full capitalist society, people are voting with their feet. And a lot of people, you've had the great resignation. A lot of people are leaving low-wage jobs, realizing that they can do better for themselves. One of the countries with the highest wages per capita in the world does not have a minimum wage. When you look at Denmark and Sweden, now they do have collective bargaining and other things. It's a strong labor area, but they don't set a minimum wage. I think that the lowest industry wage that's been agreed upon there is above the $15 an hour mark. So I don't know. I mean, I certainly want everybody to be paid what they're worth. But I mean, the minimum wage seems like an issue that's really taking care of itself. Don't you guys think? I mean,
yeah, we've said that on the show, that it feels like it's kind of happening whether people want it to happen or not. The other part, though, is there's people that I've talked to about the minimum wage in depthly about, and they seem to have this idea that like it's all at once and you can't phase it up. Have we waited too long to phase it up, or is this just something, like you said, it almost just kind of works itself out like it has in the last year or two?
I've always thought that it should be tied to inflation and the consumer price index in each particular state. I mean, there's been some studies that show, $15 minimum wage in Lycoming County, Pennsylvania is different than a $15 minimum wage in Los Angeles, California, or even Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. So, yeah, you can certainly phase it up, and that's usually the way that it's done. If you were to go from, what is it now, $7.25 to $15 an hour, that's it normally is phased up. But I understand, folks saying that those wages should be set by the fair market. But then you have people that now the market is setting those wages, and people are saying, well, why the heck should people at McDonald's or Burger King be making $15 an hour? Well, because that's what you have to pay them to show up to work. So, it's always interesting hearing those arguments, because I'm an economist. And really, believe it or not, I don't know if you can tell by talking to me, I'm really not that partisan of a guy. I like to look at things from a non-Republican Democrat perspective. And, I think that the market's working, but it seems like there are some people that are typically, identified with my line of thinking, which are conservatives and Republicans who say, well, they love markets when they keep wages low, but they don't love markets when wages go up. Well, I think that the market should determine wages, and I think it's good that people are making more money. I don't have a problem with that, I guess.
Well, Mark and I have said on the show, it almost feels like a willingness wage. Like you're no longer paying people based off of their qualifications. You're paying people on how much do I have to pay them so that they are willing to come do the work. And so we've used that phrase, like a willingness wage, is what it feels like we're in right now for a lot of the industries you just referred to.
Absolutely. And look, I believe in work ethic. I think it's what's made our country great. But, another thing that's made our country great is our people being able to work hard and get it and start out, as I did, and move from, lower middle class to upper lower middle class, right? Or whatever it is. But people should have that. I'm joking, but the upward mobility, that's something that's important in this country, I think. And it is work, but it's also the understanding that people have to be rewarded appropriately for the work that their labor.
Yes. Well, I think, honestly, I think Jeff and I, almost all the things that we discuss here come from a nonpartisan, that we're trying to see what. So that's probably why it works. I don't know if I've ever asked you this before, but I know Jeff and I have talked about this, and you said, you're a registered Republican, and you kind of give kudos where you think kudos belong, and you give criticism where you think criticism belongs. I've always thought one of the things about Governor Wolf that hurts him in today's world is that when he's a speaker, and I just saw him give his address, that he is so non-charismatic. And when you look at the Trumps of the world, the Bill Clintons of the world, even the ones that were more subtle, like W and Barack were more subtle, but they had their certain charisma. And then you look at Christie in New Jersey and what's his name in New York, who just got in trouble. But in the modern world of politics, people like bigger personalities. And when Wolf talks to people, it's just a snooze fest. Do you think that hurts him?
Pennsylvania's had a history of having governors who are maybe bigger on ideas than personality. I mean, when you look back at Governor Casey, great guy, but they tend to. Now Rendell was certainly an exception to that rule. But yeah, I mean, the governor comes across as a bit professorial at times. And, even though we've had some opportunities to sit with him in person, and I find him to be a very, engaging, intelligent person.
That's actually what I've heard.
Yeah. I mean, he certainly wouldn't be accused of being overly charismatic. And I don't mean that as a criticism. It's just what it is. But no, I mean, that is something that people look for. It's something that Pennsylvania has really only had a few, really charismatic, big personalities. Rendell was one of them for sure. Governor Ridge, I guess, to some degree. So yeah, it's an interesting point.
Before we want to get you back on the road, because we appreciate
I have to do a
I know. I wanted to keep him there long enough for an officer to knock on the window and say, "Sir, is there any trouble?"
Yeah, we can.
But before we get you going, I do want to ask you, because we talked about local, we talked about state. The last thing I just want to kind of zoom out, and I wanted to ask you about China and Russia. Opening day of the Winter Olympics, they declared a no limits partnership, essentially backing each other. There's nothing necessarily like signed. It's not this conference that they had, but this personal meeting between the two. They've basically said that they are going to back each other against the West. To me, this is substantial, and maybe it's because I'm younger. Like I just maybe like I was 13 when 9/11 happened. My idea of the world, I guess this seems very substantial to me. But yet, is there just so much other stuff going on in the world that people aren't taking it seriously, or am I overplaying the substantialness of this?
It's very substantial. Now you have found an issue that I feel very strongly about. The single biggest threat to the United States of America is China. China has been the single biggest threat to the United States for some time. The reason that they have been allowed to be such a big threat is because of the fact that our industries in the United States and a lot of folks in Washington, D.C. and in Wall Street have viewed themselves as citizens of the world as opposed to citizens of the United States. And China's economy has grown at our expense. We've shipped our jobs over there. They've sold us junk products that have made them one of the wealthiest and fastest growing economies in the world. They're a major threat. I don't think that the way that we beat them is militarily, because that would be devastating for the world. I think that we've got to start. I'm a big America First guy. I think we've got to start putting the interest of the United States of America first. And I think we've got to start. I would have no problems, and I know that this is controversial, with a trade war with China. I think that we need to bring our manufacturing back to the United States. We need to start buying America again. We've got to quit making China rich. The only way you can do that is by not sending politicians to Washington who are in favor of making China rich. And they'll talk about things like, we have a global economy, and at the end of the day, this economy works for everybody. We've seen that that's not the case. High-paying manufacturing jobs going to China, going to Mexico, leaving this country have been devastating to the middle class. I think it's what's killing the middle class. And I think if we don't get tough and get serious on this, it's a major problem.
How, as somebody on the outside looking in, the more I read about it, it just feels like everybody is either relying on China or indebted to China. And that's on every continent. How serious is that? Is that kind of news fodder, or is that as serious as it seems?
It's 100% serious. It's deadly serious. are, and again, our public officials since the 1970s have allowed this to happen with bad policies. I don't know. I mean, they were either naive or corrupt, maybe both. I mean, this is a problem that it's only really now being talked about in the mainstream. But if you go back, Pat Buchanan, who's one of my favorite guys, and Lou Dobbs, older fellas, and even, I hate to mention the name who gets everybody worked up, but Donald Trump has for years, since the 1980s, been talking about this. Pat Buchanan's been talking about it. There are a number of people, and that is really what the divide in the Republican Party has been now. It's between the globalists, the George W. Bush and George H.W. Bush, and the America First people. And that's real. And I think that's why that really, more so than Donald Trump's personality, his tweets or whatever else, I think is what woke up the working class in this country. And we don't have to agree that, Trump was good, bad, or whatever, but he woke up the working class in this country. And I think it's a good thing that we're now talking about China. The thing is, we should have been talking about it for 40 years.
Interesting. Are we
All
okay
right,
to let
guys.
him get back?
Thank you so much.
Back on the
good.
road.
We've taken up his time. It's funny because for two guys who don't really love politics, we end up talking about it more than we should. And having you on,
everybody should talk. I think everybody's opinions are important, and you guys don't give yourselves enough credit. You're very, you know what's going on. Politics is for everybody, and it's it's government and how things are run, and it's important for everybody. So, but I also like to hear talk about sports and things that are fun. It can't all be politics.
There we go.
Well,
that's
good.
what we're going to get to. Jason, thank you so much for coming
guys.
on. We really, really appreciate it, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Sorry about the choppy reception.
hey, don't worry about it.
We
Don't worry
appreciate
about
it. Thanks,
See you.
Jason.
Yep.
All right, there we go. I can't explain it. I just feel smarter after I talk to Jason. Is that awful
Well,
to say?
this
Like,
is the thing, and now that he can't hear us anymore, right?
I'm sure he can still listen to the show. But
he comes across like, and he looks like an intellectual. He's got the glasses on, and he
Sure.
looks like an intellectual, but he's funny and he gets it, and he's not his. You can tell because he is neutral, even though he says he's
Sure.
maybe not neutral. What did he? He's a registered Republican, and he probably leans more conservative than liberal.
He's very solutions driven, and that almost exceeds his politics.
His opinion is not about like I'm right and you're wrong.
Sure.
His opinion is about like kind of here's all the intelligent facts, and he presents his information it's very palatable for those of us who aren't as well versed as he is, and it's very friendly.
Yes.
It's not this, I'm sure you've had professors in college who it is important that they constantly remind you that they are smarter than you.
Sure.
And he does, and that's why he works. That's why he's been successful, because he can be smarter. He can disseminate it.
Yes.
He can disseminate it without making you feel stupid, and do it in a laughing, friendly way that makes you not only smarter, but you enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah. No. So thank you, Jason.
So I hope he didn't hear any of that, because I don't want him to think that I'm a nice guy or anything.
No, that was nice of him too, to make the cop wait. And
Yes, sir. Officer, listen, I'm Jason Fitzgerald, and I'm live, and you will hold on.
No, we appreciate him coming on. Before we go today, last night, really good game. I thought it was. You didn't think it was a good game?
There was a lot of it was fun. You guys came out you guys were hot as could be in the first quarter, and we couldn't make a shot.
I think we're highly motivated.
We were motivated too. The second quarter, I think we won by 2 points.
Yeah.
If the second quarter would have been first and the first quarter would have been second, it would have been a lot more fun. But at the end of the first quarter, we were down 13, and we were just playing catch up. I think we got it to 8.
Listen,
I was proud.
Hold on. Basketball's boring. Let's talk about, you said it yourself. The crowd was spectacular. And you and I said, maybe it's because it was a Monday night. Maybe it's because people didn't get to really do it for a couple of years with COVID. Whatever the reason was, that gym was packed and it was rocking. The student sections were great. I was forget the basketball game. The aura, the atmosphere was absolutely incredible.
I remember looking into, because I was at a wrestling match Montoursville had. Because one of the cool things we did at Montoursville this year, and I think it's the first time we've done it, we had all the guys go to a wrestling match, or as many of the basketball players as they could if they didn't have overwhelming academic stuff to do.
Okay.
But we went to their Southern Columbia match a couple weeks ago, and it was busy. Like the gym, and I remember sitting there with one of my assistant coaches, and I said, I don't think we've had this many people at a basketball game. Well, last night the wrestlers came to our, and they supported us, and they were in the student section.
Yeah.
And I walked in, it's as packed as I have seen our gym, other than a day that you have multiple playoff games. There's like 4 teams with 4 different crowds, just for 2 teams to be there. It's the biggest student section I've ever seen us have.
Okay.
It has to be the biggest traveling student section you guys have ever had.
I mean, we've had it.
Maybe a Williamsport.
It's tricky because we have the Williamsport game, and then on top of it, we have been fortunate the last couple of years, like good state runs, stuff like that. I agree. It's probably the biggest local
for a local,
crowd
just a normal
that
game
we have had since I've helped. Yeah.
No, and it is, and it's funny because we talked about this before we went on. I was a little bummed yesterday before the game that it was a Monday, because I thought if this is a Friday, it's going to be. But now we talked about it, maybe because it was Monday.
Yep, I think the Monday did it, and well, this is the other part too. Again, it's funny what we don't realize, and for 17 straight Mondays, all anybody did was watch football. Like
it's certainly an alternative.
You ordered wings and you watched the football game and whatever. And now all of a sudden, this is like the second Monday since there was no Monday Night Football, the third Monday.
Well, and and
all of a sudden, like people don't really like. There's no Monday Night Football game, nothing else. Like, let's go watch the basketball game. I think that played a part.
There probably does, because after the NFL season does, then the national championship game is now always on a Monday.
There you go.
So yeah, I'm sure that's part of it, but it was fun. Yeah, I mean, it was really fun. You guys are good. And like I said in the pregame, because we were on Web Weekly, and I said to Jim Webb, like, we want to slow it down. You guys want to speed it up, and we play zone, and hopefully they don't have a great shooting night. And you guys did. What's really weird is, it wasn't about pace. It was just about execution. Like when you guys got open shots, you knocked them down. And
yeah, you're really into this basketball thing. I was just more into I just enjoyed the crowd.
Well, you enjoyed it because you won by 23.
No, I enjoyed the crowd. That was exciting.
The crowd was fun.
It felt like 2019. I've noticed with everything in my life right now, can I find things that make me feel like it was 2019 again? And maybe that's fatigue, maybe it's COVID fatigue, like whatever. But I've noticed that my most enjoyable moments over the last like 4, 5, 6 months have been when I've found moments where I feel like it was 2019. I've had moments where like I will be out at a bar and I will look around and people are smiling and laughing and everything else, and I'll be like, this is great. Like,
you know what you weren't in 2019?
Where was
a state champ? That's what you weren't.
Okay. What's your point?
No, I was just saying.
You think that's bringing me down?
It is bringing me down. I was trying to take a shot and it didn't work. I will say that, and as being through coaching in a couple different stints, and not all student sections are created the same. And for whatever reason, this year at Montoursville, we have kids that are fun.
Yeah,
they get it.
It's been cool.
They're not idiots. I mean, they're high school kids. They are idiots, but they're not idiots.
The ESPN table and fake setup booth and everything is fantastic.
They interviewed me pregame, like 4 minutes. It was real. They had a microphone.
Yeah.
They had the kid with his phone.
Yeah.
They're like, "Can we interview?" I'm like, "Sure." They interviewed our photographer person. They might interviewed a ref.
Yeah.
Like it's a good group of kids who make it fun. And with all this stuff, and I know we had Chris Massey wrote a really nice article today in the Sun Gazette about the incident and the dangers of storming the courts and how it's all in good fun, but we need to be careful. I don't like our students and the Hughesville students were fine. Like they're yelling stuff, but it was our students and your students I thought were fine.
Mm-hmm.
You're yelling stuff and we're yelling stuff. But it was really, really fun. Other than the fact that you guys made a lot more shots than we did.
It is. The neatest part about this, right? Because I had rivalries. We all have rivalries when you're growing up and you're playing high school sports or whatever it may be. The neatest part about this rivalry truly is the bridge. Because even like growing up for mine, like my rival was like 25 minutes away. And like, it wasn't, but like literally you can walk. I know people who walk. One of the people we work with walks like Loyalsock to Montoursville and that. Like, it's so close and it's so tight knitted, but yet there's this divider, this clear divider line of. It's just a very unique rivalry. It really is. I'm not saying it's better than other rivalries, but that bridge and the uniqueness of what actually separates the two communities and how close they actually are, it's really, really cool.
No, it is fun, but we do clearly understand that you snobby Loyalsock people. We go across the bridge up to the Golden Strip all the time. The only time you guys come to Montoursville is when you need something at Walmart.
Walmart?
And until Kmart went away, you never went to Walmart. So we understand that.
You'll appreciate this. I would bet 50-50 when I go out to Sam's Club or to the mall, I go through Montoursville instead of going on the highway.
Really?
Yep. Because you're just riding.
It's that little Americana.
It is. Yep.
It's got that all the small towns. Muncie's got it, and Wellsboro's got it, and it's Lewisburg's got it.
Yeah. And really, once you're through the initial drag of town, I mean, it's
smooth
lane, it's smooth sailing. It's almost no different once you get through it. So yeah, I go across the Green Bridge more than you probably would.
Well, and I do think too, because of the world of social media, the kids just all know each other, and they've played against each other in this sport, but they've been on travel teams and they've played Little League, and there's more. When I was a kid, there was Little League All-Stars. There's one team, and now there's a 9 and 10 and a 10 and 11, and so you kind of get to keep seeing all these kids. So I think that makes, in a way, it makes the rivalry more intense, but I think it's also friendlier because these kids, and it's. Sure. I also think in the world of social media, maybe you can talk about this. I think kids date out of their school district way more than we did when I was in school.
Yeah, I think there's I think that's certainly like a third or a fourth of it, 100% is social media. I think too, just like more people drive, I feel like kids
Do they?
I think so. I think like parents and kids are much more willing to drive or go places than they were before. You don't think so?
I don't know.
I remember growing up and the idea of like having to like go somewhere, it was like an event. It was like a trip. And I feel like now, like, that's not the case. I feel like it really is ingrained in like American society that like you get in the car and you go places and it doesn't, you make it happen. It doesn't matter how far it is.
I don't know. I think there's an online dating aspect to it. Okay. And obviously with texting, communication is so much easier. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm trying to think of anyone, and maybe my grade was unique. I'm trying to think of anyone who had a significant girlfriend that was not from our school. And I can't think of any. And now they're all, we had kids missing practice because we had multiple kids on our basketball team missing practice this year to go to the winter formal at Williamsport.
We were talking
and that never happened when
I believe it. We were talking the other day about how different dating life was even for like my friends versus the kids now. Mm-hmm. Because when we were 16, 17, and 18, the majority of us didn't have cell phones yet. Like the majority, you in the Northern Tier, I don't even know if there was like true cell phone service.
I was going to say, was there a tower?
When I was 17, 18, like going out of my senior year of high school was when people started like actually having legitimate texting phones. Okay. But like when we were 16 and first getting our licenses, like that wasn't really a thing yet. And so we've talked about even just like dating etiquette, even just like meeting people, setting up places and times before you left. Like you couldn't just get in the car. Like you kind of had to know where you were going before you got in the car. It's all shifted. One of the things that came up though was even just like the amount of cheating in high school relationships had to diminish significantly. It had to because of the phone. Because of social media and the phone.
You can know where everybody is all the time.
I could be wrong. I feel like in like the 70s, 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, if you had multiple boyfriends or girlfriends, like how would anybody know that you had multiple boyfriends or girlfriends?
You seem like you're speaking from experience.
No, I'm just saying like between communities, like how would you possibly know? But now with social media, I mean, you have your Instagram and your Facebook and you got to post the picture and she's posting the picture of you. Like you could go on a date with somebody and there was no picture. Like there was no, like nobody knew that you were going on a date with somebody. So I feel like that has shifted significantly. Like how, if you're a 16-year-old girl or boy, how do you date without somebody knowing you're dating?
I think you're implying that when cheating goes on, everyone's in the dark.
But cheating was a strong
I think a lot of cheating goes on when people know that.
Yes, but cheating's a strong word, because when you're like dating in high school, like you could go on a date with one person, and then if you go on a date with somebody else 2 weeks later, you could kind of move around more.
No, I do get what you're saying.
You could move around the waters easier in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. Whereas now, like if Jimmy took some girl on a date, like everyone would know. Like it would be on Instagram, it would be on this, it would be on that. Like people would be texting Jimmy, like, where are you at tonight? He'd be like, oh, I'm actually taking so-and-so, or he'd have to lie, but I don't think he would. So the point I'm making is like, you dealt with none of that in those time periods.
No, I do get that.
You could take somebody on a date in 1988 and no one would know you were taking that person on a date.
See, but that's not true, because we all did. Because even the old style phone, when you had to dial, like when I was 17 years old and I was a junior in high school, if it was I knew where everyone was. So-and-so's here, so-and-so's here. This is
you mean before the phone?
Before cell phone. We had real phones with a cord on the wall.
I understand that, but what do you mean you knew where everybody was?
Because you talked to people. And like you knew on people didn't show up at a party on Saturday night and say, hey, where's Scott?
But and
they're like, nobody knows.
That's my point.
But they didn't, because somebody knew. They're like, oh, I called him. Yes. He's at so-and-so's house.
But you're just believing what people are saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so the point I'm making now is like, listen, there were lots of people, and I'm sure throughout the 80s and 90s, that said they were places that they weren't. The difference that I'm making to you now is like, you could be scrolling through someone's Instagram and there's so-and-so's head in the background of a picture, and now you know that's where they were. And that was non-existent until I was out of high school. That wasn't even a thing.
I do get what you're saying. My take on how much conversation for these kids that are, even the kids that are in real relationships, is done via text. And how many people are much more, that they're not the same person in person as they are in text. How many people are way 100%. Funnier, way more interesting, way more. And so that's the whole, like, I wonder how, so when Hannah is with you in person, she's like, I want the guy on the other end of the phone. Does that happen?
I've told you, and I have talked about this before. I'm way more introverted than what I come
You're
out
not
as.
that introverted.
But this is I think where you're going with this is, if you're I'm way funnier with you when I text you than when you just walk in the room and talk to me.
And I think there's lots of people like that.
You'll text me something and I'll actually send you a decent zinger back, and you'll like laugh and you'll be like, that was funny. You'll walk in this room and I've got nothing for you. Like, I don't have any routine. I don't have a good one-liner for you, like a completely. So yeah, I think there's lots of people like that. 100%.
So, and that is an interesting dynamic too, that how many people fall in love with the person that they're texting, but then in person, they just don't have that same oomph.
This is the other, I really believe this is happening, and Euphoria and a couple of other shows kind of put me onto this. I think there's people who fall in love with the idea of people now, where that wasn't as often or even the case back then. And what I mean by that is, like, there are people that you only know through social media. And you feel like you like them and you have this relationship, and it's like, but then you've never met the person. You've never even really talked to the person. You don't know the person. Yeah. So I think there's people who very much fall in love with the idea of someone that probably didn't occur 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yes, there's so much more information to, like if you met someone back in even in your day.
Right.
If you met someone, you couldn't go home and stalk their Facebook page. You couldn't go and do anything. All you had to go on was the 5-minute conversation you had at the skating rink or the grocery store, wherever it was.
Right.
And yes, so the world is very different. And for our kids, I'm not sure it's going to be worse. You know, it's just different. We couldn't have done with it, but you know, like we talk to kids, you know, in with our teams and stuff, that like, your phone, all the capabilities you have with your phone,
Mhm.
of the text you can send, the pictures you can send, the videos you can send, all these things, you can do a lot of damage to yourself and get yourself in a lot of trouble. And we're talking like us coaches never dealt with that.
Oh, no, never.
And you guys do, but they're kind of like, well, it's all I've ever known.
Well, it's normalized to them, but I don't think that means it's safer or more dangerous than what, like, if it's safe, it's still safe.
It's still dangerous.
Just because it's normal doesn't mean it's not safe or not dangerous.
Correct.
Right.
But they don't, like we talk to adults, and if I've had one person my age say this, I've had 1,000 people like, thank God we didn't have texting and cameras in our pockets and all these things. And because just think of all the stupid texts I would have sent and the stupid tweets I would have sent when I was a 15-year-old and I was angry and I knew everything.
We went through that in college because when I was in college, my freshman year, Facebook was released. You had to have a .edu and it was spreading around. Twitter was created, I think, my second or third year in college. Vine was a thing. Like, Instagram came right towards like the end of it. And we were all experimenting. Like, we had no idea what this stuff was. Like, you mean I just type out this 140 characters and it's there forever? My friends and I, we will still die laughing because now they do like the memories and it'll show you,
on Twitter,
this is what you said 10 years ago. This is what, and like, we will put in the group chat and we'll like, it'll say like, so-and-so said this. And we're like half laughing, but then the other half of it is kind of like, what was I doing?
Yes.
Like, what was I, because again, we were just, no one knew what it was. We were trying to figure it out. I'm not kidding to you. We got on Twitter like the month it started. I have a couple of friends that would die laughing.
Did you study it all at college? I hear about these video game tournaments.
We studied a little bit.
Basketball. Were there classes involved?
We created these Twitter accounts. And we had a thing called, my buddy will die laughing, we had a thing called Duff Quotes. And anybody in my life who knows Duff, that you'll get this. We had a thing, we would do hashtag Duff Quotes. And anytime he said something that would make us laugh, we would hashtag Duff Quote and put it. And so it was an inventory of all the funny things Duff said throughout the semester. And then we would go back and like, if we were just sitting on the couch at like at 2 a.m, we would go through and look at him and laugh with each other. Okay. That's what we were using Twitter for in like 2009-ish. Like that was like our idea of like, well, what do you do? There was the idea that other people were going to see this.
That other people cared.
The idea that people thought like, oh, like I'll put this out and everyone will see it. It was like for us, like it was like, we'll put this on here. And
it was like a group chat.
It was. That's essentially. And so now you think about Twitter and the idea that some of that stuff lives there. You know what I mean? Like, unless like we go through and proactively delete it, like that's all just sitting there. Yeah, I think some of this stuff is like, I just think, I'm not saying people shouldn't get in trouble for it when they do things or they say stuff, but like there has to be an understanding, especially for kids. Nobody really knows how to use this stuff. Right. And even the parents with their kids, like their solution is to get off of it. But that I don't even know if that's a solution.
Oh, no, it's not.
Just telling your kid to get off of Twitter, I don't think that does anything because like the kid needs to understand A, how to use it, but B, like, what are the social constructs? Why shouldn't I say that thing? What is it? But I sympathize with parents because like how you didn't use it. You didn't.
You're trying to teach something you have no idea about.
No clue about it.
No, I'm with you. But I totally agree. 110% the whole, we'll just get off it is not the solution. If everyone else is on it, it's not making your kid better to keep your kid from it. It's better to, to teach your kid and to get your kid to understand
it's hard.
The pros and cons.
It's really hard. I'm very wary of criticizing parents when it comes to social media because like you already hinted at, you're trying to teach something that you never experienced. You have no interpretation of how this actually works or how you yourself would have reacted in the same shoes. So like, I always joked, I think if I ever ended up with kids, I feel very fortunate that like I went through it. Like I caught the tail end of it and I at least had that experience of, I'm rambling, but I always kind of in a weird way, I always appreciate like you'll post on Facebook every once in a while and you're kind of on this stuff. And like our good friend Jamie Spencer, who writes for the Web Weekly, he's always posting his fishing stuff and stuff with his kids and different things like that. And I've always thought I almost wish every parent kind of tiptoed into it, like dove into it a little bit, just so that they had the feel of what this really all is. Because otherwise it has to be almost impossible. It's got to be really difficult to talk to your kids about it, discipline your kids about it. Like, how do you even do that?
No, I get it. And like 90% of my Facebook posts are when I find something that I think is funny and I can make people laugh. And that's my whole mindset with it. But no, I think the whole, when you got to it of how to deal with parents and social media, parents instructing kids about social media, it still all gets back to the meat and potatoes of, be a good person, treat people with kindness. And, the things that you're posting is it out of kindness? Is it out of humor? Are you trying to make the world better? Or are you trying to hurt someone?
Can I ask you this? Because I think you're exactly right. The difference, though, and you and I have talked about this before, I think the best way to learn is through failing.
Oh, so, you're going to make mistakes.
And so in person, everything that you just preached, in person, we get to fail at that maybe once or twice, but it's not on record. So like, I may have said something wrong, and then maybe I get to apologize or whatever else, but it doesn't just live on in eternity. The only place it lives on is kind of like in your psychology or in the other person's psyche. But you get a chance to kind of like flop, oh, that didn't feel good, I shouldn't have done that. Social media, though, it's so different because it lives.
It can, absolutely.
It lasts, and it's there, and it's, so you almost, if you're a kid, you almost don't get the same leniency or the same opportunities to, I said this stupid thing, you're grounded for a week, and then the world goes on.
And then it's over.
It's kind of like, I typed out this dumb thing, and now it's concrete in some cases.
That's a very valid point.
So how do you, as a kid, how do you learn to maneuver around this stuff where everything you just said is correct, but in society, you kind of get to flop once or twice. Then if you don't figure it out, society kind of comes down on you. But social media is different. It's it's the hammer right away, and it's there. And so I don't know. It's very tough.
It's when you talk about failing and kids failing, it's one of the things that we've always agreed with in coaching. Like, kids are going to fail. And we don't encourage kids to fail, but we're kind of like, yes, that's going to happen. And there's lots of coaches that overreact to, like, every time a kid screws up, that they need to yell at the kid. They need to ingrain in the kid that you just screwed up. And we're just kind of like, no, just keep playing. Like, it's going to happen. Just learn from it. But there's not the screaming and yelling aspect of, like, as long as you know and I know and everybody knows.
Sure.
But
it would be like in sports if, like, when you made a turnover, like that turnover just hung over your head the whole time, and no one was allowed to forget that you made that turnover or that you airballed that shot.
But fortunately,
it just followed you
because everything is following everybody. So you kind of have a tendency to get lost in the shuffle.
Maybe.
Yeah, and I would think that when you sit down probably with a group of seniors who have been through this their whole lives, if you probably sat, you could probably pick out, do you remember when you tweeted that? Do you remember when you posted that? Do you remember? And there's probably lots of the communal, just like the basketball team who's like, I dribbled it off my foot. I went back court for no reason. I airballed a free throw. Everyone has their humiliating laughing
I went
moments.
the wrong way and almost scored a layup.
How old?
I was a senior.
What?
Yeah, crazy story.
Did you miss it?
I'll tell that another time.
Did you miss it, or did you realize?
Right at the last second, I stopped.
Wait,
true story.
Hold on, give me game situation.
I think it's good for another time because it's a funny story.
Okay,
it's worth talking about. But yeah, I almost did. But again, like I said, like, I didn't have to live with it. Like, it wasn't like people couldn't go through like my player feed and see that one. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
And now the thing too, at 34, you realize it would be a better story if you did shoot it.
Kinda. It certainly. I mean, at that point, it wouldn't have made. Why not? At that point.
I mean, one of the things I tell my kids,
it was a close game.
I realized, was it late?
It was late.
I realize now that no one's listening because we've been on for an hour. But one of the things I tell my team, I've told my team this a half dozen times this year. In the district championship game my junior year, I threw 5 interceptions. Mm-hmm. So, like, whenever we have a kid that, like, didn't have a good game when they were 1 for whatever from the field, or they had 7 turnovers or whatever. I'm like, hey, been there.
Sure.
Like in the district final, I threw 5. We didn't punt.
Yeah.
We either scored, it ended on a half, we missed a field goal, or I threw a pick. And that was, and the sun still came up the next day.
But even for you and I, even some of that's so much easier because like there was no huddle and there was no.
And everybody, yeah, that's true.
And so like you were kind of able to make it foggier sooner, right? Like it just, and so I don't know, like some of these guys, like some of this stuff's just, it's on film and it's on video and it's never going to go away.
Oh, that was on film.
Yeah,
I hope they burned it. I think I took it and stole it and trashed it. Back then, you could just take one hammer to the video cassette and it was over.
And that was it. Now it's in the cloud forever. Thank you guys for watching Midday Show. Thank you to Jason Fitzgerald of Penn Strategies for coming on and helping us out with some of this political stuff. Thank you to Weiss Markets for being our sponsor. And be sure to go to NorthcentralPa.com for all your local news.
We're good.
Good one. I enjoyed that.
And guess what's happening tonight at Montoursville?
What's that?
Loyal Sock Montoursville Part 2.
I think I'm going to try to come to the I think I'm going to try to catch the end of the varsity game. I don't think I can get there in time, but I think I'm going to get there later on.
Yep, the girls. It was so much fun last night. They're going to do it again.
Okay. I feel that you're like insinuating something there, but I don't want to touch.
Then it wasn't all that fun last night.
But I don't.
I'll just say you had more fun than I did. Is that fair?
Listen, when you were on the mic, I disagree.
Well, that's true.
I'm Jeff Everett. He's Mark Messina. We will see you tomorrow.
We'll see you.